When you're trying to change a habit, the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is your emotion. Your emotion can be your friend, but also can be your worst nightmare if not regulated. That is why in psychology there is an actual term that is called emotional regulation. What emotional regulation does is that it gives you the ability to regulate your emotion and help you understand your feeling and the way that you react to your surrounding. Emotional regulation can happen in 3 basic steps. First of all, we have to identify what is it that is causing us that emotion that we want to change. Identifying the main thing that we want to change. That could be sleeping too much, that could be a relationship that made you angry or made you sad about yourself or made you unwanted. Whatever feeling it is, identifying that particular emotion is the first step. The second step is now we know what is it that is causing us to feel out of balance. Now that you have that idea, you have to monitor yourself. Think about it this way. You're not gonna go to a hospital and say, I have a cut somewhere in my body. I mean, you could, they're gonna check all over your body, but it's gonna take a little time. But if you go to a hospital and say, I have a cut in my hand, they can treat it immediately. That's the goal that we're trying to achieve here by our second step, which is identifying things that triggers those emotions, things that urges us to be in that mental state that we don't want to be and we want to get out of. And the final and the third step is to introduce new things that we want to do to promote healthy behavior, to promote emotional regulation so you can regulate those feelings. So let me give you a quick example. I am pissed off and angry because I always miss my appointments or my classes. First step, done. Now I know what is it that I have. I have this anger and I have this frustration that is causing me, that is resulted from missing my classes. Now, emotional regulation, emotional intelligence comes in place when I identify that emotion, and now I sit down and think about, okay, how can I kind of defeat that feeling, that thing that makes me sad, makes me frustrated. Now I have to think about what does it that triggers that unhealthy behavior. So I can look inside and say, okay, every night before I go to bed, I play with my phone. That's a trigger. Okay, that causes me to sleep late. Another thing is that before going to bed, I have all the lights in the house turned on. Okay, that's another thing. Another thing is that every night before I go to bed, before I sleep, let's say, I call my friends and we start talking and chatting all night long. So I identified 3 things that I want to modify. 1, reduce the amount of time that I use my phone. 2, reduce the amount of lights in my house so I can feel my body can prepare itself for sleeping. And 3rd, reduce or eliminate late night calls. Now, the 3rd step is to introduce new habits that I can do that can combat those negative habits. For example, play a relaxing music, dim down the light, put a limit on my phone. You know, all phones and technologies nowadays, they have limits that you could put in so it stops you from using certain type of apps. The goal of emotional intelligence and emotional regulation is to find ways to first identify those negative emotions that is causing you harm and is putting you out of balance. Identify things that triggers those emotions to activate within you. And finally, find healthy habits, healthy ways that you could combat those negative feelings. Simple, right? But not really. Sometimes it gets tricky. It's not as cut and dry as what I explained right now. So if you can't figure it out on the first day or second day, don't be alarmed and don't think, oh, this is the end, I can't do this, and move on. Give it a little time. Stay with those feelings, stay with those moments, and try to understand your perspective from where you are at this moment, at this point, right here, right now. and then give yourself time to experience and explore those ways that those emotion comes about. By doing this, you allow yourself to give yourself that little opportunity to look at you from an outside perspective. That's the whole goal. The main goal of this exercise is for you to come out of this little box that we have created for ourselves, that we call us, and look at us from a third perspective. That way we could identify. It takes some time, it takes some practice, but with doing this, you could allow yourself to better, I could say, be there with you and support you when you need it. So remember those 3 steps, practice it and exercise it. It takes one day at a time, and as long as you're moving forward, that's all that is count.